Hello everybody and welcome back to the Philfac Academy of Linguistic Analysis. We've got a very special episode today. We're going to look at two different newspapers from two different countries in two different languages. We're going to look at the Guardian from England in English and the French Le Monde from France in French. And what's fascinating about tonight's episode is that we have what seems to be, from the same day, exactly the same story, and actually a very similar picture. And the story itself is a human corridor. So this is the war in the Ukraine. And what is a human corridor in this context? It's where forces are about to attack a city, but they open a corridor and that lets the people go through the corridor to a different place. So it's a human corridor. Now, obviously, this is a very sad topic. I can't imagine what it's like for the people going through that human corridor. They're leaving behind their homes. Maybe they're leaving behind some loved ones who might then get attacked or something like that. So it's a sad topic. And if this type of thing makes you feel sad, then it's probably not a good idea to watch these videos because, it's a very abstract from reality, or their reality, linguistic analysis. We're looking at our current reality, the fact that we're lucky enough to be able to analyze something like this and look at how people can create the same pictures, but a different feeling about the same story. So what we're going to do to start off with is human corridor. You are the chief editor of The Guardian in England, or you are the chief editor of Le Monde in France, and it's your choice about what picture to use to demonstrate this human corridor. So have a think about that. Like, what do you think, based on my description, would be a suitable picture to show? I would kind of show perhaps buses or maybe a train full of people with lots of suitcases or something going somewhere. What about you? What would you show? Press pause if you need to have a think about that. Okay, so what picture would you show? First, let's hop on to the search engine that nobody uses, Bing from Microsoft. And here you can see a couple of little examples. There's a corridor with a tank. There's a corridor in a hall. You got a man with a machine gun. So interesting enough, in Bing, when I put human corridor and then human corridor war and human corridor evacuation, there's nothing that's clearly what I was talking about. So interesting that maybe this isn't a very typical concept in war. Maybe typically you don't have these human corridors. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But thinking about what you thought would be a good picture, looking at these ones, maybe you've changed your mind. I don't know. Maybe that guy with the machine gun, the Kalashnikov behind the dirt, not sure. Okay, so now let's have a look at the two pictures. And okay, so here we have a picture that was on the front page of one of these newspapers, maybe The Guardian from England, maybe Le Monde from France. And its title was Human Corridor. And the chief editor of this newspaper chose this picture to demonstrate the process I was talking about of people leaving a place and moving to a different place to escape an attack of a city. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, if we didn't know that the topic was human corridor, we might think that it's something. Well, it does look to be. You can see the Ukrainian flag there in the background. It does look to be in a very kind of Soviet type place with the building in the background. This kind of Soviet type bus with a Cyrillic. Yeah, you might think that this is some sort of local Eastern European government thing for the elderly, but no. Unfortunately, I guess these people are about to get on the bus to go somewhere. And these young men are helping them. So it's obviously a sad picture. And so you've got human corridor up the top, and you've got this picture here. That's one of them. And the central figure, as you can see here, is the grandmother, who obviously needs some help, and she's receiving help. One hand here and one hand there. Some wonderful help from this very kind gentleman. She's got some water there. You've got some blankets. So it's a, not a pleasant situation. There are people there taking care, helping out. There's a man there taking a picture, a journalist. Okay, so that's one of the newspapers. And in the second picture from the other newspaper, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same in that the central figure is a grandmother, and the grandmother's being helped by some people. But what about the feeling? So before we look at the second picture, from like 0 to 5 in terms of emotions, does this make you feel, like a little bit sad or maybe a little bit angry? That would be like a 2. Does it make you feel fairly sad, fairly angry, like a 3, 4? Does it make you feel quite angry, but you're not losing control, or quite sad, but you're not losing control? That would be like a 5 or 4. If you're really starting to get upset by this, then please stop watching. Go and do something more positive. If you're really starting to get upset by this and you want to keep watching, that's what I call going into reptilian 5 to 10. You're starting to lose that kind of more modern human control that we have. And it's going from your kind of heart emotions to these reptilian uncontrolled emotions, possibly. Okay, so think about that. What would you give it? I would give this, geez, human corridor. To me, it really makes me feel quite sad because they're old people. Look, there's a wheelchair there. I'm feeling really sad looking at that, so I'll give it a 4. I'm not kind of going into depression sad, but yeah, it's like, damn, why? Okay, so give it a mark. Press pause if you need a bit more time. Ready? Let's move to the next one. Okay, this is the second newspaper. Same story, human corridor, same day. Same grandmother. Well, different grandmother, but the same idea of a grandmother. Okay, there it is. So I'll give you a bit of thinking time. Okay, so I don't know about you guys, like what mark would you give that? Like for me, like wow, that's a lot more emotional. Like looking at it, my goodness me, human corridor. It's kind of like corridor of potential death. You've got the same central figure of a grandmother, but first of all, you can see that she's a lot more pale, and then she's also not walking, and she's in a trolley. She's in a trolley. If we go back to the first picture there, she's able to walk. She's got a walking stick. There are people there with modern facilities of wheelchairs. But this woman here, they have to rely on a trolley. It's snowing. It's cold. The men around her have machine guns. So there's this idea of sickness and frailty. She's in an incredibly fragile state, and you need these men with machine guns around and helmets. And then this guy's looking, I don't know, what do you think his expression is? I'm not 100% sure. Maybe he's angry, maybe he's determined and focused and resilient, I'm not sure. But yeah, there are emotions rocking on here. Again, you've got a journalist, which is quite interesting there, taking some pictures in the back. More soldiers there in the background. And you can see there that there's something a bridge that's been destroyed in the background. Okay, so yeah, like I would give this one, probably like start to think, damn, what the hell are these people doing? Why are they doing that? 6, 7. Maybe you're feeling sad. I don't know. What about you guys? Would you give that more? Like whatever you gave this, let's call it picture number 2. Whatever you give picture number 2, is it more than this one here in picture number 1? So me, I gave picture number 1 a 4, and I'm going to give this one a 6. It's pretty bad. The idea of her being so old. And again, guys, this is quite sad, so please feel free not to watch this. There's a human being who's suffering here, and we're just analyzing how she feels. But that's the philological faculty. We're looking at how this picture helps create a reality that we perceive as being true. I mean, this might not be true. Maybe she's quite healthy. Maybe she isn't. I don't know. But we perceive it as being true. When we look at it, we say, yeah, the poor thing. So how this picture is put together and how we feel about that picture, our emotional reaction, that's what we're looking at here. So yeah, I'd definitely give it quite a strong one there. It's a lot stronger than picture number 1. What about you guys? Okay, feel free to leave a comment below about whether or not you feel one of them is going up towards 10, or in actual fact this one made you feel a lot sadder because there's nobody with a gun. And that's another thing. If you have a look at this man here, he's clearly an aid worker. That man there, he looks a bit like a fireman, a bit like an aid worker or a fireman. And it's a peacetime picture. This is actually people who live in peace. Whereas this one here with the blown up bridge in the background, soldiers with these machine guns, that's a wartime picture. So that's why I think it's a lot more. For me, it's actually 2 different situations. One of them is a peacetime picture, which is, quite unpleasant. And the other one is a wartime picture. If you think about, would you rather be in picture number 2 or picture number 1? I'm definitely going for picture number 1. Okay, so leave your comments down below what you think it might be. And now is time to guess. Let's go with picture number 1. Do you think it's the French picture, or do you think it's the French Le Monde, or do you think it's the Guardian? Picture number 2, is this the French Le Monde, or the Guardian, the English Guardian? Well, if you've been watching these videos, you know that the Guardian has been charged. It's been emotionally charged. The pictures have been emotionally charged. The titles have been emotionally charged. They're very pumped at the Guardian. It's kind of a little bit behind the Sydney Morning Herald. Typically a lot more charged, in my opinion, than the New York Times. So this is the Guardian. I'll put a big G. This is a Guardian, and this one here is Le Monde from France. Okay, so what about the titles? Let's have a look at the French. Okay, so it's war in Ukraine, which is, it doesn't have the word Russian there. It's just a war in the Ukraine. Who's guilty, we don't know. And then indirect. And then a new, I don't know, I think that's trail, should be permitted the evacuation of civilians from bombed villages or towns. I'm not sure. Yeah, so this is fairly positive. Like a new corridor will permit evacuation. So that language is fairly positive. It's reasonably factual, actually. Not that positive, it's just factual. So I give it a 0. That one there, like I said before, I was getting a bit sad, so it'll give the picture a 4. And then down here, the Russian army announced a regime of ceasefire. So that's again quite neutral. They announced a ceasefire. It's nothing that positive or negative, it's a fact. For 8 hours to put in place corridors, humanitarian corridors, the evacuations commenced. 5 particularly exposed cities or towns to the capital. Okay, so that's all very factual. I'll give it a 0. So I'm not going to go into big detail, but I think the rest of it around is probably going to be 0. So 4 plus 0 is 4, multiplied by 5 is 20. And so we give that's fairly emotional. That's fairly emotional 20, but it's certainly, it's more like the New York Times was a few days ago, if you remember. Definitely not like the Guardian or like the Sydney Morning Herald. It is sad, but in my opinion, quite a bit calmer. If we have a look at the Guardian one, okay, so if we have a look at the Guardian one, it's tricky to say, like, first of all, Russia-Ukraine war, so Russia's there. Russia wasn't in the French one. It's quite interesting. There was no Russia in the French equivalent. Here it is, Russia there. Russia-Ukraine war, but not Russian invasion, interestingly enough. It could be more negative. Moscow promises humanitarian corridors. I don't know if that's positive or not. Like, Moscow promises, it's actually fairly positive. Like, Moscow claims it will provide. You could create a lot more doubt around what Moscow says. So again, you've got the presence of Moscow, you've got the presence of Russia. But yeah, I don't know. I'll give that a 0. It's fairly factual. US to send, very factual, Patriot missiles. That's already kind of getting a bit negative. Like the idea of a missile, like promise missiles is a bit different from promising a humanitarian corridor. So I'm going to give it, it's still quite factual, but just the idea that it's talking about missiles, instruments of war, I'll push it into like a 1. I'll give it a 1 there. And you can see it has clear actors. Moscow promises, US to send. And so it's creating that, like, this side and that side type of thing. Not particularly this article, no, I'm thinking too much about the context. I'm reading too much into that. But you do have a clear actor in Moscow or Russia and a clear actor in US, and then Patriot missiles. And then down here, dismisses Polish plan, solving logistics, what we know on day 4 of the invasion. We will fight. And again, this is actually by Guardian's like standards in recent times. This is actually fairly neutral. That would be a 2 as well. So I'm going to give that title a 1. The picture I think is quite strong. I'll give it a 6. So 6 plus 1 is 7 times 4. No, it's not times 5. 35. Plus 2 is 37. Okay, so that's actually been fairly low for the Guardian. It was a bit higher. It's going up like above 40 before. And so we can see that, yeah, things can vary. Things can vary from day to day in terms of the emotional content of the language. Perhaps because it's live, they're not delivering this as a specific story. So that way it could be it's moving into the factual. I think live feeds tend to be just a bit more factual than analytical or possibly emotional. And you can see here as well with Le Monde from France, it's also live. Okay, so yeah, interesting result today. And for me, absolutely fascinating. Again, very sad, guys. I mean, it's just horrible that people have to go through this. You had the, refugees in this country, refugees in that country. Let's hope it all finishes soon and these people can get back to their normal lives. But yeah, like the one human corridor, the same title, and the same central figure of a grandmother who's being supported by men around her, but still quite a different feel in the 2 different newspapers. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Big shout out to my student who said let's have a quick look at what the newspapers are showing. I wasn't going to do it today and this popped up, so big shout out to that student. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing all you guys in the next one.